Football season is officially returned. We just saw Notre Dame versus Navy and JSU UTEP, a couple other good G5 games going on this weekend, but it's time to turn to the big dogs. Starting off with Utah and Florida on Thursday night in Salt Lake City. This has got a really good game written all over it, and it's really only because of one reason. Cam Rising being out, Utah quarterback is in question. The line has already moved from like 7 or 7.5 down to 4.5. Could go even lower. Ultimately, it all rides on will Cam Rising play or not. And I think ultimately, and I'll get to it as we get through this video, that's exactly what the outcome of this game is going to ride on as well. You can see it on your screen. Florida is not going to be the same team they were last year without Anthony Richardson at quarterback. They do get Graham Mertz through the transfer portal, transferring in from Wisconsin. But again, they are 107th in return in production. Most of what they're lacking and what they're missing is that of Anthony Richardson. Well, you can say, oh, you're getting another kind of plug and play guy in Graham Mertz. Guys, Graham Mertz is not a top 5 pick in the NFL draft next season or top 10, whatever it was. That's just not the caliber of player that you're dealing with. You're dealing with a guy who has severely struggled his last couple of years in Madison. Luckily, they play in a division in the Big Ten that wasn't as stacked, and they didn't have to play Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan every year. They kind of got the lesser end of the Big Ten. Like I said, Florida is 107th in return in production. Utah is number 16. They returned 75% of their production last year across the board. I think it's a lot higher defensively than it is offensively, but regardless, number 16 in the country is going to be hard to beat. 2022, Florida won this game 29-26. Came down to the wire. They were at home. They won it. You can see my prediction. I think Utah wins this one 33-21, but I also think that's with Cam Rising playing at quarterback. I think if he's healthy and can play, I think Utah runs away with it. Utah has not lost a true home game since September 18th of 2018. I did lose at home in 2020, but that was COVID. All things were out of whack anyway, so I'll say a true home game in the last 5 years. So that's one major thing that Utah has going for them, and ultimately why I think they will pull out the victory in this game. But let's take a look at the Utah depth chart. That's where things are going to kind of get interesting because, like I said, Cam Rising is a question mark. Well, guess what? Brandon Rose, backup quarterback, he's out too. So who knows who's going to get the nod at starting quarterback position for Utah in this opener. Now, next week you go to Baylor or you play Baylor. I don't know if it's home or away for you, but regardless, that's not an easy 2-game stretch to play without your number 1 and number 2 quarterback. And one big thing to note here, not listed on the depth chart, is Micah Pittman, the transfer from Oregon, from Florida State that Utah has got this year. That could be a very, very key thing when you look at this Utah offense. Last year, they kind of lacked just true explosiveness at the receiver position. Pittman is shifty. He's very, very fast. He could be a guy that is the top target for whoever plays quarterback at Utah this season. Then you look at the tight end position. Obviously, they replaced Dalton Kincaid from last year. You got Brant Kuth. You got Thomas Yasmin. And you've got a couple recruits coming in that aren't too bad themselves. If we switch and look at the Florida depth chart, it's a very similar situation. They have a lot of new guys coming in. But you also have some returning talent. You've got Ricky Purcell. You've got Caleb Douglas. You got Trevor Etienne. You got Montrell Johnson Jr. You've got athletes all over the field for Florida. But ultimately, where my concern is Graham Mertz at quarterback first. And second, I don't know what to expect from a team that brought in 9 Power 5 transfers and 18 4-star recruits. How well can you get those guys to mesh immediately? There is no build-up game. You go on the road to a team that hasn't lost a home game in 4 years, and you've got to win. I don't know if you can get it done, truly. I would love for you to. I'm a huge Billy Napier fan. I want the SEC to do well. But at the same time, I'm kind of all for chaos this year. So with those couple things in mind, I would like for Florida to win this game. But unbiasedly, I think Utah is a very, very good team, and an even better team with Cam Rising at quarterback. So, like I said, Graham Mertz is the biggest question mark to me. I just don't know if they are going to be able to get the production out of him that they need to win this game. Now, if you flip it over just a little bit and go and look at the recruiting for both teams, obviously this is not the full recruiting class. The top two is Utah. The bottom two is Florida. Quincy Ivory, 3-star guy, edge, 6'5", 255. Something to note about him is he was a 3-star, but he's the number 3 at his position in the class of 2023. Jakeem Jackson, number 4 at his position, 4-star corner. Those are two guys that I think could kind of be sleeper-esque, kind of come in, make an impact, guys that you wouldn't necessarily expect to start day one, but could play an impact this season. For Utah, you got Spencer Fano. His brother actually transferred in as well. Offensive tackle, ranked number 1 in the state of Utah, number 7 at his position nationally, and number 42 overall. Then you go down. I mentioned Dalton Kincaid. You lost him last year. Now, you've got good quarterback or good tight ends there to replace him, but I think Dallin Bentley, the number 9 overall player, number 1 tight end in the state and nationally, is also on that roster. That's going to be a guy that I think could make his way up the depth chart as the season goes on. We know how much Cam liked Dalton last year. Dallin could be that next Dalton Kincaid for Utah. So, like I said, going back to just ultimately who's going to win this game. If Cam Rising plays, I like Utah by double digits, by 2 scores. If Cam Rising doesn't play, I think ultimately Utah is going to get it done. Kyle Whittingham he's a veteran coach. He's been there for I don't even know how many years. They're back-to-back Pac-12 representatives for the Rose Bowl. They won the Pac-12 last year. Now, they did lose 4 games last year, but they're still a really good football team. So don't count out Utah. I like Utah to win, regardless of who's at quarterback, but don't sleep on Florida Gators this year.